if the Bible is divinely inspired, it should be perfect. Yet there's plenty of discrepancies. Why is that, and how do we know which idea is correct? I know we're doing an entire message series coming up, so a little plug there for it.
Yeah.
That'll hopefully wrestle this to the ground a little bit more. But do you have a quick response for that?
Yeah, I'll first of all give a plug. I think it's week 3 for that, which would be like May 18th or somewhere in that arena, that we'll be giving a 35-minute answer to this very question, because it's a huge question. It's important to note. So there are discrepancies in the Bible. Some of those discrepancies, and this is almost always when people give me a discrepancy, it's just about detail inclusion. What I mean by that is that in one book of the Bible, say a gospel, it says one thing, another book it says another thing, and most of the time it's just that this person mentioned it and this one didn't. It's not that they say the same thing that are opposite to each other. It would be like there was a time, interesting story, when our kids went to Disney World with us. So we had them each write a little essay when they got done. We've got 4 kids, same as Alex. We had them each write a little essay about their time at Disney World, because, we count that as homeschool time. We counted everything as homeschool time. So we wrote a little essay about it, and we had them read each other's essays. And it was interesting that some people talked about Splash Mountain and some didn't at all. Some left out Epcot Center. One left out the idea that Grandma and Grandpa were with us, and they sponsored the entire trip. And so you're like, okay, does that mean that they contradict each other? No, they just all 4 had the exact same experience with the exact same people, but included different details. This is the most important thing with discrepancies that we'll find in the Bible. Now, with that being said, there are some real discrepancies that are in the Bible where I can't remember the exact example. I'll think of it for our May sermon, but there's one place where it says something like Solomon had 3,000 horses, and another one says Solomon had 30,000 horses, and you're off by a factor of 10. And you go, okay, that's not just a difference in perspective here. There's something real that's going on. And what Bible scholars generally say is that was a copyist error, that at some point along the line, one or the other of them added a 0 or took off a 0, and like legitimately there's a discrepancy there, and one is correct and the other one is false. In the Christian Missionary Alliance, our doctrinal statement is that we believe that the Bible is fully true, I don't remember the exact language, in the original language, so in the original writings. And that we acknowledge, and I think anybody who's got a decent bit of scholarship behind them acknowledges that there have been some copyist errors along the way. Now, the copyist errors that are there are not significant. They don't alter the meaning of the text. They don't undermine our understanding of the truthfulness of it. But I think just an honest person has to say, yep, there were some copyist errors that were in there. Also, I would add that there were some verses that were added in later. Now, this is something that some people don't know, but if you go like to the end of Mark, in Mark chapter 16, or if you go to the book of John, these are the 2 biggest places in the New Testament, you'll see a number of verses, like about 8 verses in each case, that say, the earliest and most reliable manuscripts do not include Mark chapter 16, verses 8 through 16. And you go, well, what's the deal with that? Well, what happened was, when Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark, he ended it at 16, verse 8. But somebody said, we need a little bit more detail about the resurrection thrown in here, so we'll just add it in. And some scribe early on took it upon himself to add that in. Same thing with John chapter 8. This is the story of the woman caught in adultery. That it was, now, either of them, could it have been true? It could have. I mean, what they're writing could have been true, but it wasn't there in the earliest manuscript, so we don't consider it to be authoritative. So those are a couple of examples, and there are definitely more examples of difficult places in the Bible that we have to say, let's be honest as scholars about this. Now, one of the things I love about the New International Version and many of the modern translations is they have that little note in there so that you know when the places are that there are added or missing verses, or there's a little asterisk. So you know what the controversial space is, which is far less than 1%, but it's got it clearly marked. And I really love it about that. And I'll put a plug in here. I'm sure I'll plug this during the series as well. There is a series of books called the Hard Sayings books. So you have Hard Sayings of the Old Testament, Hard Sayings in the New Testament, Hard Sayings of Paul, Hard Sayings of Jesus, and I think Hard Sayings of the Old Testament Part 2. And they are just books that are published by InterVarsity Press, and they go through verse after verse after verse that are hard sayings. And if you're like me, that's kind of recreational reading. Like, I love going into the hard sayings and hearing what scholars have to say about them. If you're kind of broken like me and you say, I want to know how those kinds of things can be reconciled, either to just look up here and there as I see them or just to read through them cover to cover, I highly recommend all of those resources. They're written by brilliant scholars that have thought through the details very, very carefully.
Yeah, that's good. And I think with that whole conversation, right now there's on TikTok, there's always something trending, but one of the things that's been trending for the last year or so is, people opening up to these passages and they're like, they're not in the Bible, they're like, they're removing truth from the Bible. I think Matthew 17:21 is one of those where it says, and some spirits only come out through prayer and fasting. And so they're trying to remove the power of prayer and fasting. And so they represent all this on TikTok in a 60-second, video. And you can watch that and be compelling. Like, people are trying to remove it from the Bible. Or there's articles and a documentary that's coming out recently on the word homosexual being added to the Bible in 1946. And on, first pass, these are very, you watch it and they're very compelling arguments, but the idea of textual criticism and how much goes into this is you've got to do a lot more digging. And so sometimes we want, quick, fast answers without doing all the digging that actually goes into finding, no, there's real reason for all this stuff that can be explained, much of like you did there, that does not discredit or disavow what's happening there in a world that's changing with different things. And so I think that's important to know as well, especially in a world that is doing a lot of bite size and throwing things out there and trying to convince people of truth. Maybe that's not there, on social media and so on and so forth. And so